Okay, so we're really today continuing to build on ideas that we primarily already know, okay? And this question here is basically addressing a concept that I could have asked without giving you any additional practice problems, but I think it's really important because it's a type of decision that you will probably spend some time making in the future, and it will really help you improve your wealth over time. So let's think about Victoria here. She's got $70,000 in income and is single. Let's assume she has no kids. So far, she has made $2,000 in traditional 401k contributions and $3,000 in HSA contributions. She has $4,000 in potential itemized deductions and $8,000 in above-the-line deductions. And so the question is, how much more should she contribute to traditional vehicles to completely avoid the 22% U.S. tax bracket? This is a good way to think about things, all right? It's not all black and white, okay? Contributing $1 to a traditional 401k is more meaningful when you're in a higher tax bracket and less meaningful when you're in a lower tax bracket. If your income is very low, 401k contributions are only kind of useful. If your income is very high, 401k contributions can be essential, because if your tax bracket is very high, you might be taxed at a 37% U.S. tax bracket on top of the highest Georgia tax bracket, okay? So I'm going to answer everything we could about this question just to give you additional examples. So let's go through the steps that we did in the last set of videos. You start with total income and then work your way down the list. So her total income is $70,000. All right, we need to make sure we go through the correct steps. Some of these steps are necessary to answer this question. Some of them are superfluous. So the next step is to go from total income to gross income. Okay, and what we take out as we go from step 1 to step 2 is anything that isn't realized as income. That could be health insurance premiums, 401k contributions, etc. You might be wondering, how could she possibly not have any health insurance premiums? Well, there's some specific rules out there that, for example, you can be on your parents' plan for a while. Rules could change over time. It's feasible that could happen. Nonetheless, let's solve it the way it's written. Her gross income, you see, would just be the $70,000 minus the $5,000 we have in contributions that essentially are never realized as income, okay? So we're at $65,000 now, and this is the $65,000 that actually would show up to her, all right? The first $5,000 here never even gets entered into her bank account or anything, okay? The next step, from gross income, we move to AGI, a really important one if you want to get more in depth with personal finance. Advanced topics often use AGI as a starting point. So AGI in this case is adjusted gross income. You take gross income and subtract off above the line deductions. Above the line deductions always reduce your taxable income, so they are preferred to itemizations, and that'll push her down to $57,000. All right, so we go from total to gross to AGI. The next step is where you have a choice. You can take the standard deduction, or you can take the itemized deduction. We're trying to figure out the U.S. system here, so we need to know what the standard amount is. For single, the standard deduction is $12,400, okay? So she could reduce her taxable income by $12,400 by taking the standard deduction, or she could reduce it by $4,000 if she takes the itemized deduction. Obviously, she's going to prefer the standard deduction. So, moving to this step here, her taxable income is $44,600. Okay? So to specifically answer our question now, you could sort of imagine her planning this all out at the beginning of the year. This is what she's doing so far. But what she'd really like to do is avoid paying any taxes at the 22% level. She doesn't so much mind realizing income when she's taxed at one of these lower brackets. But that 12 to 22% is a jump that a lot of people want to try to avoid. Imagine if you could somehow reduce your U.S. tax burden by 10% all of the time. That would be amazing. Well, in this scenario, she has the ability to do just that. By making some additional traditional contributions, she can reduce her taxable income substantially, okay? So what she would basically realize is, if she currently pays taxes on this, all right, she doesn't have any credits, so this would be the end of the line for her. This is how we would solve her taxes. Not even going to bother solving for that because she's not going to do it. This is not the choice she's going to elect to make. But if she did nothing else, this is how much taxes she would pay. Okay. And the thing to realize here is marginal taxes matter. Okay. The real problem area right here is this income. This income right here, she's being taxed at a 22% rate. That's a problem. So what she might decide to do is make additional 401k, IRA, HSA, FSA contributions to reduce her taxable income, okay? So to answer the question we have here, how much more should she contribute to traditional vehicles to completely avoid the 22% U.S. tax burden? What we need to do is figure out what amount is being taxed here, and there's your answer right there, okay? The 22% bracket currently has income of $44,600 minus $40,125. So, what she needs to do is, instead of realizing that income as $4,475, she should make $4,475 of additional traditional 401k contributions, or IRA, or whatever else, okay? They're all pretty much going to have the same tax consequences. All right, so what she can do is she can put this amount of money into her traditional 401k, and now she's doing some really smart planning. She's going to save 22% on this money here. All right? If she wants to make any additional contributions beyond that, probably go Roth at that point, right? Because being taxed at a 12 or 10% rate is never really a big problem. That 22% rate is what we want to avoid, okay, in most cases. So for her, if she's trying to avoid that 22% tax rate, this is the amount of contribution she needs to make. This is the type of tax calculation I find myself doing. It's often hard to get exact values solved for because sometimes you don't know exactly how much income you're going to earn at the end of the year. You may be making a mistake, right? These things get really complicated when you start diving in. But I usually have a really good idea of where I stand. So if I find out, in November, if I look at my accounts and kind of see where I'm at, I often have a good idea if I should be ramping up my contributions at the end of the year or not. You're going to see some very similar questions on the quiz to this. This is the general way to answer those questions. Not a whole lot of new content for today, but I did want to go through a few ideas that really didn't fall into any other lesson. But I definitely wanted you to leave this class having an idea of how these things work, okay? So I'm going to try to lump all this together into the idea of volatility. The stock market is incredibly volatile, and it can get really scary at times. I've got a friend who's got like $600,000 in the stock market. He's basically just been saving a tremendous amount of money over time. So $600,000 in the stock market, what that means is if the market goes down 1%, he sees his value go down $6,000. Okay, if the market drops 40%, right, over a few months, which is very possible, that would be like losing $240,000. You got to really be steadfast here and not make any rash decisions. So when it comes to dealing with volatility, what you need to try to do is take your emotions out of it. If you can figure out how to do this perfectly, let me know, because it's really a hard thing to do. This is part of the reason why I recommend rebalancing. We talked about rebalancing where you sell stocks and buy bonds, or vice versa, depending on what the market is doing. Rebalancing is smart because it forces you to buy and sell based on rules. You're not making your own choices, because if you make your own choices, you might make emotional choices. which aren't based in logic, okay? So, this is kind of what I see from people a lot. I'm in various Facebook groups and stuff, and I'll see people talk about if the market's going up, should they buy, should they sell? This is all emotion-based, and we're going to try to avoid emotion. If the market goes up, people often have two basic instincts. There's that FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. Market goes up, people think, well, I've got to buy, I got to buy, I got to buy. Meanwhile, there are simultaneously people thinking, I need to sell to lock in my profits. Think about this. You buy some stocks and they're up $1,000. You might think, I'm just going to go ahead and sell so I don't have to take on any extra risk. I'm satisfied with my profits. That might sound reasonable, but it's not. Because stock market investing should not be short term. If you are a short-term stock market investor, you're a gambler. That is not investing, that is gambling. The market is incredibly volatile over the short run. So if you have money in the market and you know you're just putting it in and taking it out based on your own whims, you're just gambling, okay? So I would say neither of these are reasonable. If the market's going up, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to continue going up, okay? Furthermore, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go down. The market is incredibly random. You just want to be in it as long as possible. Market goes down. I see people make the same sort of processes here. Some people say that you need to buy while it's on sale. I hate this so much because there are smart people who think this is correct. People who are good at personal finance say this stupid thing all the time. The market drops 5% and they just go, oh, the market's on sale. Now I can buy more. That's dumb. Okay? The reason it's dumb is research shows that the market is uncorrelated with itself. That means if the market went down yesterday, that has no predictability in determining what's going to happen today. It's all really based on the theory of efficient markets. If the market always went down 2 days in a row, then everybody would already sell on day one. So the market will already figure out what's going to happen, right? The market's always forward-looking, which means everything is unpredictable. Let me try to state that again because it is so important to understand. This is getting back to the theory of efficient markets, which we talked about a week or two ago. If everyone knew the market's going to drop tomorrow, they would sell today. So tomorrow's expectation would already be encapsulated in today's price. So what that means is tomorrow is unpredictable. Okay? Tomorrow is always unpredictable. And if the market goes down today or up today, that doesn't tell us what's going to happen about tomorrow. Okay? So this is stupid logic. Likewise, if the market goes down, you'll get people who do panic sells. That's usually dumb too. I'm not going to say always because there could be scenarios where it's life-changing. You need to sell because you already have enough retirement. I don't know. There could be scenarios where this is not completely unreasonable. But the bottom line is when you invest in stocks, think long-term. Don't care what it does day to day. Don't check your stock market portfolio every single day to see what it's doing. Just continuously invest and don't even pay attention. Check it once a month. All right? Again, if you can do that, let me know because I'm checking them out all the time. But I'm not acting on it. All right? I'm not panic selling. I'm not FOMOing. I'm not doing any of that. I'm just checking it just for entertainment purposes. All right? So, all of this is basically silly. Okay? Thinking about it this way is silly. The market tends to go up. And its performance is uncorrelated with past performance. The only thing correlated about the stock market is risk. When the stock market is jumping around a lot, that does tend to continue. When the market is stable, it does tend to be more stable in the future days. So risk and stability do tend to run in trends, but the gains and losses aren't actually based on trends. It may seem that way. It may seem like when the market drops, it tends to continue dropping, but that's always looking at it from a retrospective viewpoint, right? It's like flipping a coin billions of times. Occasionally, you're going to flip tails 20 times in a row, but it's not because tails is more likely. It's just random. Sometimes it will randomly go down a lot. Sometimes it will randomly go up a lot. Again, just randomness. So, in regards to dealing with volatility, what can we do to make ourselves feel a little bit better about how volatile the market is? Some point in your career in the future, I hope all of you have over $1 million in the stock market. That's going to be sort of scary, okay? I can tell you right now, I'm not anywhere near $1 million. I have like $150,000 in the stock market. Even then, I feel kind of scared. When the market drops, I don't feel good about it, okay? But that's silly. I'm not planning on selling stocks. I really shouldn't care. What does make me feel a bit better about my stock market situation is I employ dollar cost averaging. Dollar cost averaging. You'll see this referred to as DCA. Right now, go on Google, search DCA or dollar cost averaging. You're going to see all kinds of stuff pop up. Dollar cost averaging, this is the idea. You are frequently making small, incremental stock market purchases over time. Okay? Dollar cost averaging is frequently making small, incremental stock market purchases over time. For example, you might make $500 a month in stock market purchases right on the first day of every single month. In fact, that's what a lot of people do, right? If you're making, for example, $6,000 in 401k contributions, for most people what that means is they're going to be making $500 a month. And they're going to be making purchases often on, the first or second day of the month over and over and over again. Let's think about what's nice about that, okay? Over time, the market looks something like this. Let's say this is the S&P 500. Over time, the market kind of looks like this, right? It goes up, trend line is positive, but there's an incredible amount of volatility in the meantime. Economists sometimes call this a random walk. There's a given trend line that market's growing at, but we're kind of just randomly ambling about that trend line. It's like a drunk person walking home from downtown. All right, they may fall over into the bushes, but they're going to get back up and stay on that trend line, okay? So here's kind of the risk, What if you made a big purchase in the stock market right here? If you were to buy right here, and then you were to sell right here. Well, that's a disaster, right? You can kind of imagine these worst case scenarios. The worst case scenario being you buy at the peak and you sell at the trough, and that is feasible that could happen. So what dollar cost averaging does is creates all of these different purchasing points. So rather than making like one purchase a year or something, you are constantly buying over all of these periods, right? So each of these little periods here represents a purchase. So what that means is, when the market is going up, of course that's good because you own stock. But when the market is going down, you will be able to purchase stock at progressively lower prices. So what this does is it basically reduces some of your risk. It doesn't mean you're likely to perform better in the stock market, but it reduces risk because that worst case scenario of buying at the peak and selling at the trough is not feasible anymore, okay? Because you're going to be buying at many different purchase points. Some purchase points are going to be not so great, like this one near the trough. Some purchase points, in retrospect, are going to look pretty good, like this little trough right here, okay? So dollar cost averaging, by buying a bunch of times, you effectively average stock market prices for your purchases, okay? I'm trying to make a similar, like an analogy to something else in life, but it's hard to make a really good one. But let's just imagine that you buy 50 shirts a year, and the price of shirts is volatile, okay? You could buy all your shirts at once, but that's kind of risky because if you buy 50 shirts at once, maybe you happen to buy shirts when they're very expensive. You could be lucky instead. You could end up buying 50 shirts when they're the very cheapest. But regardless, you might think buying 50 shirts all at once is kind of risky. So what you might decide to do is buy one shirt every single week until you hit 50. That's kind of like dollar cost averaging. You'll buy some cheap, you'll buy some expensive, and you wash out some of the risk. Okay, so that's the logic of dollar cost averaging. What ends up happening is you average out the purchase price to reduce risk. And let me be very clear here. Dollar cost averaging does not improve your expected returns, right? We said the stock market on average returns 10%. This will not push you to returning more than 10% on average. But what it does is it reduces the risk. You're less likely to have a 30% return, but you're also less likely to have a negative 20% return. It smooths some of that volatility down if you dollar cost average. So if you're making 401k contributions for 35 years, you are doing tremendous dollar cost averaging. What that means is sometimes you'll buy at the peak, but also sometimes you'll buy at the trough. And over a 35-year period, you don't even really so much care about volatility because you have so many different purchase points. That's the logic of dollar cost averaging.